Hello. It's been a minute. Well, actually, about a week, I suppose. Health news is the inflammation seems to be doing pretty well, the systemic inflammation. Uh, I'm never pain free, but I'm pretty close. I mean, I'm satisfied with where I am. So that's very, very good news. Uh, Wanted to not just complain, but offer, when the times are good, that, things are good. Uh, Sleep's still down, trash, but that's by normal measurements and never really been a big sleeper. Still would like to do better. I'll probably take a nap in a little bit just because we have to go to a friend's for dinner, and I just want to be in a good mood for that. Went to see a band last night, so that was pretty nice at a winery. Um, Got to disconnect with people, which is always good. Um, I guess why I'm making this video is this is on my mind. I actually wrote the Japanese embassy apologizing because the U.S. is I'm a U.S. citizen. The U.S.'s illustrious commander in chief decided to make some comments that I think were inappropriate to the Japanese PM. Uh, the PM just took it, just had to sit there and take it. Being on a diplomatic mission, and there was really no point in dignifying it with a response. Um, it was precipitated by I believe, by a Japanese correspondent asking why the U.S. didn't alert Japan to the imminent strikes on the planned strike on Iraq, putting us in a war footing. Uh, and there are valid answers to that. And, Trump uh, covered it slightly. Just they saying he didn't want to, over communicate that information. Which makes sense from a secret operations standpoint. I'm not saying I'm a agree or disagree with that, and that's not my place to do. But at least it's a rational answer. But then he goes on to speak about how well the Japanese should know all about sneakiness. You didn't tell us about Pearl Harbor, I believe was his exact thing, and you know, talking about uh, that kind of thing, which I think was inappropriate from a number of standpoints and sort of ill-informed, which is a problem. I mean, first of all, it's nonsensical from the standpoint of um, we're talking about an ally asking to be informed, uh, or at least a friendly, however you want to slice it, or a friendly force wishing to be informed about operations as opposed to informing the enemy, the one we were actually attacking. So that part doesn't make a lot of sense. Uh, it's just insult for insult's sake. Second thing is, it's a painful part of history for everyone, and I have family that died on the Arizona, so it's not like I'm without a sense of loss on that. Um, so I do have uh, empathy and feelings for uh, all that. Uh, as while I don't have any family that was uh, Hiroshima or Nagasaki, uh, that was also a monstrous event in human history. That yeah, it's just bad is bad. But I think the other thing about Pearl Harbor, um, that I try to keep in mind is, and that's why I bring up this book, Midway: The Battle That Doomed Japan, the Japanese Navy story. Um, it's actually written by two Japanese naval officers. I believe one of them was, I believe, the commander of the first wave to hit Pearl Harbor. Anyway, so it's written from the Japanese perspective. While it's called Midway, and that's the battle that was fairly decisive uh, in cutting off the Japanese Navy head, according to the Japanese. But it kind of covers the whole process, the whole from even pre. the conditions leading up to pre Pearl Harbor, to pre the Japanese involvement with the Americans. And it really sheds a light on things. In fact, I believe this book's a great book. And I believe the book was used to be required reading at the Naval War College, which really kind of covers advanced military theory and whatnot. But it was really informative and let me understand the Japanese perspective, and they're pretty frank on all the mistakes they made. Even you can see it in the title. But it was frank, and it discussed the Japanese position on Pearl Harbor and how really they felt strategically from. And I don't want to over explain it. And, there's because there's experts and people involved that have written a book on it. But the basic idea was that due to naval treaties, what they could be like arms limitation type treaties, what kind of navy they could build was dictated by these almost risk the game, risk like ratios of sea power and how many they could build and what tonnage they could build and what range they could build, because the idea was the treaties wanted to make it where they couldn't really become an expeditionary force so much. They were, we want you to be able to protect your home waters, but the way we've restricted you, you really can't do you don't have a lot of power, like a lot of power of victory and being able to go elsewhere. Well, and that was the naval theory at the time, the ratios and whatnot. But the Japanese were looking at what they were allowed to build, felt that it was an untenable position. The treaty was untenable in that it left them so vulnerable that they were just waiting to get clobbered. So the idea of the initial attack, they felt they had to preemptively strike because of the treaties and how they had in the arms limitations agreement of what they had to work with, that they just had a target painted on their back, in their view, and that they were going to get taken to the cleaners, and that it was imminent, and that they went ahead and had to strike first, or be lost completely. That's a very short treatment of that area. It's well worth reading, especially those initial chapters on that. All of it's good, but just in terms of covering that. But it did give me a better sense for the Japanese strategic perspective on it, not even cultural or emotional or anything like that, but the strategic perspective felt like their hand was forced into that. So it's, I think, something to read that gives there's a little bit of a sense of peace to it, really. For me, I think it's it's often said that World War II is just an extension of World War One anyway. That they're not really two distinct events. That World War One never truly ended or got resolved. With the the military, the strategic posturing, the strategic placement, and like that, and the economic conditions and all those things, and the entangled alliances and whatnot. So it gave me, I think, a better sense of, what the Japanese felt they're up against, and I find it peace in that, in the same way that we dropped a couple of world burners um, on the Japanese, and the American perspective was we're going to lose a lot of people uh, trying to fully end this. And again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that was, the perspective is that the it's nearing the end of the war, but that the Japanese won't give up. And we were in a race with Germany, and so the demonstration of the technology was also seen as the ultimate in. I don't want to just call it saber rattling, but it was an ultimate demonstration uh, to shut down the war. Again, I don't. This isn't about agreeing or disagreeing with it, but it's about understanding that perspective. And I think it's one that the president missed on, and maybe I think we can, just from an American's perspective. And again, I've had loss of family, throughout the war, and specifically in that attack. But yeah, it's one of those. I think we have to keep the lesson, not forget the lesson, but move on in terms of uh, the national mm, animosity. You know, uh, and I understand that people that were in that war. Uh, I met one of Doolittle's raiders once. That they can certainly have a different feeling, a different perspective, being literally boots on the ground. I saw um, a soldier in the Pacific Theater. I think he actually landed on Iwo Jima, but him discussing, uh, the Japanese, and to him they were still his enemy. But he would talk about how you'd have to bayonet them because they play dead and then try to get you from behind, and tactics of that kind of thing. Um, so I can see his personal misgivings, and he um, it's a lot like that. The interview is a wild ride. I'll see if I can find the guy's name and put it in the comments. But excuse my language. He's a guy that just didn't seem to give a shit. Um, in a very powerful military way, I suppose. Um, but in terms of where we are now, I think we have to put the animosity to rest. And, it was a world war. It was an ugly time for everyone. And that's not to excuse any particular nations or operations things. It's just, um, yeah, I was in Germany. I was in Munich. It turns out, just by luck of the draw, uh, I was over in Oktoberfest a few years ago, and I was there during Silver Reunification, the 25th year of East and West Germany reunifying. Uh, so it was quite the party. But I'd just be sitting in the bar and talking to some Germans, and sometimes, I mean, young guys. We're talking 25 or 30 years old, and they would have maybe a little older. Well, maybe not, but they would maybe a little older. But they were, they would. I remember one turning to me with this haunted look, at like, I am not like my grandfather, who was a Nazi soldier. Um, so they're haunted by that legacy. Even what it's like, dude, you were not even born at that time. Um, oof, and that's a hard one. Which is why there's still some uh, laws. They're very um, Germany has a number of laws about just making sure that kind of thing doesn't happen. I remember working on laser tag, and at the time, I don't know if it's still this way. This was, boy, about the same, probably longer. Twisters had to be, oh my gosh, coming up on 30 years ago. Uh, yeah, wow. No, 30 years ago, maybe even a little more. Um, where it was a laser tag like game. It wasn't the brand laser tag. Um, where for the German market, you weren't allowed to shoot another living human person, even with the toy gun. So we had to turn it into like a puzzle game. Um, yeah, and sometimes you hear that with, there's stanzas of songs and things like that that aren't to be used anymore. Anyway, uh, but it just comes down to uh, putting all that into perspective and um, not weaponizing. It was all bad, but not weaponizing that for out of pettiness uh, to distract from modern things that are happening and modern warfare that we are currently involved in. Uh, so I guess that's what I have to say about that. But and my apologies for if there's got a little dark there. But the book Midway is, I think it's required. I should still be required reading. It's good for at least historical reading. It's a fascinating insight that we don't often get, I think, from our former enemies or from uh, people we're up against. But to get a post game analysis of that is really something else. So do check it out. It's there is I believe Audible does have an audio version if that's your thing. Of course, the text I maybe suggest even reading along. Um, it's that good of a book. Anyway, thanks for listening to me ramble. Have a great day.